The Elysian bitch smirked as she mocked humanity's primitive bodies, not knowing those frail ape descendants were hiding the power to crush her arrogance under 10 tons of classified armor plating. 25-year-old Private Matthew Henderson stood at attention in his too large GDC uniform, sweat sticking the rough fabric to his muscular frame. He felt small and feeble next to the Elysians towering over him, their sleek, midnight black carapaces bristling with advanced weaponry. The bone spurs jutting from their shoulders and forearms made it clear that Elysians never skipped arm day. As the induction ceremony finished, Commander Ilara sauntered up to Matthew, her mandibles click-clacking with amusement. "Oh, look at the cute little monkey," she cooed loudly in accented Terran standard, still wasting time doing push-ups as if musculus mattered. She flexed her own sinewy forelimbs mockingly. "When will you humans evolve anything useful? Claws, pincers, spikes, venom, pick one already." Elysian soldiers snickered as she poked Matthew's chest. Matthew gritted his teeth until they creaked. He wanted to pound that smug bug face into the dirt, but starting a fight would make things worse. Humans were already on thin ice after that trade dispute with the Elysian ambassador had ended with thrown punches and plasma fire. He gripped the dog tags concealed in his hand until the metal dug into his skin. Those weren't just ID tags. They hid an encrypted activation key that was worth more than 100 Elysian dreadnoughts. That key would unlock the human race's darkest secret and greatest achievement. The powered armor, codename Titan, 100,000 pounds of classified Terran wrath ready to slip over his body like a second skin and turn one primitive human into a war god that could rip apart an Elysian task force. Suddenly, lack of natural weapons didn't feel like such a big deal. Matthew pictured Ilara's face when 10-ton metal hands grabbed her by her pointy head and archaeoed her exoskeleton into the concrete. The Elysians thought they were the apex predators of the galaxy, but they hadn't seen humans when the gloves came off. Humanity didn't need claws or spikes. They had the Titans. Several weeks passed after Matthew's humiliating encounter with Commander Ilara. He found himself part of a joint human-Elysian squad, tasked with investigating an eerie distress signal emanating from a remote research outpost on a barren moon. As the squad's dropship touched down and they entered the facility, an unsettling silence greeted them. The only sound was the clanking of their boots on the metal floor. Emergency lights flickered, casting sinister shadows on the walls. Matthew took point, sweeping his rifle's flashlight beam across the corridor. Deep gouges marred the reinforced walls, and shattered glass crunched underfoot. He knelt to examine a particularly vicious set of claw marks. No Elysian or human could have made those. Something far larger and more savage had torn through here. A blood-curdling shriek pierced the air. Matthew whirled around as a massive insectoid monstrosity burst from the ventilation shaft, acid drool sizzling on the floor. Its serrated pincers snapped with hunger as its compound eyes fixed on the squad. "Open fire," Ilara barked. The Elysians unleashed a hail of plasma bolts at the creature, but they barely singed its chitinous hide. It barreled forward with terrifying speed, its barbed tail lashing out and impaling an Elysian trooper. The soldier screamed as he was flung against the wall, his exoskeleton shattering like an eggshell. Matthew dragged a wounded Elysian behind a collapsed pillar, shoving a compress against the bleeding stump of his severed arm. He popped out of cover and squeezed his rifle's trigger, but the weapon beeped and jammed. Shit! The creature's head swiveled towards him, mandibles clicking with glee as it sensed easy prey. Matthew fumbled to clear the jam, his heart pounding against his ribs. Fall back now!" Ilara screamed. The Elysians didn't need to be told twice. They turned tail and sprinted for the exit, abandoning Matthew and the injured without a second thought. So much for having his back. Matthew gritted his teeth. Like hell was he going to die here. He ripped off his dog tag, slamming his thumb against the biometric scanner. "Please, please work," he muttered. The wall behind him exploded inward, sending him sprawling. A black pod stood in the rubble, its thrusters dying down. The insectoid screeched in agony as it was crushed beneath the pod's bulk. The pod's doors hissed open, revealing a suit of midnight black armor that seemed to drink in the light. It was humanoid, but bulkier and taller, with angular plates and glowing red lights. The kind of suit that said, "I'm here to kick ass and chew bubblegum, and I'm all out of gum." Matthew dove into the armor, feeling it close around him like a second skin. His HUD lit up with targeting reticules and ammo counters. Servos whined as he stood up, now towering over 10 feet tall. This was more like it. The wounded Elysian soldier gaped at him in disbelief. Mandibles slack. Matthew ignored him, turning to face the oncoming horde of insectoid horrors pouring out of the vents, the armor's energy weapons thrumming with barely restrained power. Playtime was over. Now they'd see what a human could really do. Matthew tore through the insectoid swarm, the Titan armor an unstoppable force of destruction. Particle beams lanced from the suit's wrist cannons, punching fist-sized holes clean through the creature's carapaces and spraying ichor across the walls. His HUD targeted and prioritized the largest threats, allowing him to carve a path of carnage with ruthless efficiency. He charged into a knot of insectoids, microfilament blades sliding from the armor's gauntlets with a metallic snikt. The razor-sharp blades sliced through chitin and flesh like a hot knife through butter, leaving twitching chunks of bug flesh in his wake. Behind a makeshift barricade of twisted metal, Corval watched in slack-mandibled awe as Matthew made short work of the horde. The creature's attacks, savage swipes and acid sprays, glanced harmlessly off the Titan's armor, leaving only pitted scorch marks on the inky black surface. This human moved with a speed and ferocity Corval had never seen, not even among his own elite warriors. Then a pulsing red dot appeared on Matthew's sensors, indicating the rest of the squad. They were cut off in a maintenance tunnel, a seething mass of insectoids hot on their heels. Matthew disengaged from the melee, servos whining as he launched himself forward on miniaturized thrusters. The sudden acceleration slammed him back into the padding of his crash harness. He quickly overtook the creatures pursuing his squad, the Titan's advanced cloaking systems rendering him invisible. To the insectoids, it appeared as if their prey had simply vanished. They skidded to a halt, compound eyes swiveling in confusion. Confusion turned to alarm as an unseen force grabbed the rearmost creature. Acid-slick talons scrabbled at thin air as the insectoid was hoisted off the ground, its shrieks cut short by the wet crunch of its carapace imploding. The monster was ripped messily in half, ichor splattering the walls. Matthew decloaked in a burst of shimmering energy, the Titan armor spattered with gore. His squad, even Ilara, could only stare in slack-jawed disbelief at the walking tank that had once been a squishy human. Corval limped up behind him, using his rifle as a crutch. "Come on, let's get to the control room," Matthew said, his voice sounding tinny through the armor's external speakers. He led the way, energy weapons primed and ready. The control room was a scene of carnage. Insectoid corpses lay strewn across the blood-slick floor, the reinforced doors buckled inward. Matthew and Ilara took up defensive positions, while Corval accessed the central terminal, his remaining hand flying over the haptic keys. "By the ancestors," Corval breathed, his mandibles quivering with anger as he scanned the decrypted files. This was no accident. The Elysian Science Directorate, they created these things as weapons. Biological terror troops to unleash on our enemies. Galara's carapace flushed a sickly grey. "You mean our own people did this knowingly?" A thunderous impact shook the room, cracks spidering across the walls. Warning klaxons blared as the base's integrity fields failed, the hull breached in a dozen places. On the terminal's flickering view screens, a skyscraper-sized insectoid queen forced its bulk through the widening gaps, hundreds of warrior drones pouring in around it. "We need to go now," Matthew barked, slamming a fresh power cell into his particle cannon. "Corval, download that data and purge the rest." As the Elysians sprinted for the hangar bay, Matthew stood alone against the oncoming tide of chitin and claws. Armor autoguns spat death into the horde, piles of twitching corpses quickly clogging the breach. But for every drone he killed, a dozen more clambered over their fallen kin. "Matthew, come on," Ilara called from the ramp of the dropship, gesturing frantically for him to fall back. "There's too many." "Just go. Get that data back to your leaders," Matthew roared, energy blades flashing as he hacked a path through the swarm. "I'll buy you time." Something like respect flickered in Ilara's compound eyes. She hesitated a moment longer, then slapped the ramp controls. "We'll come back for you, human. You have my word as a warrior." As the dropship lifted off, its engines flattening the insectoid horde, Matthew allowed himself a savage grin behind his helmet. He turned to face the enraged Queen, armor systems pushed to the red line and weapons glowing white-hot. "All right, you overgrown cockroach," he snarled, micro-filament blades snapping out from his gauntlets. "Let's dance." With a wordless battle cry, he charged to meet the alien tide head-on, the Titan armor a blaze of death-dealing fury against the chitinous swarm. Matthew's armor blared warnings as his power levels dipped into the red. His movements slowed, servos straining against the tide of insectoid bodies. Acidic blood hissed and bubbled against the Titan's once pristine plating, leaving ugly pockmarks and exposed circuitry. He fought with the desperate strength of a cornered animal, microfilament blades shearing through chitin and ichor-slick flesh. But for every insectoid he cut down, 3 more took its place. They came at him in an endless chittering wave, all gnashing mandibles and razor-sharp talons. The massive queen insectoid loomed over him, its bulk taking up half the hangar. Its serrated pincers snapped forwards, aiming to cut the Titan in half. Matthew braced for the killing blow, which never came. A lance of blinding light speared down from the sky, vaporizing the queen in a cloud of superheated steam and boiling chitin. The remaining insectoids screeched in agony as the orbital bombardment rained down, slagging the base's structure into molten rubble. Elysian dropships swooped out of the clouds, disgorging hundreds of soldiers clad in power-assisted combat exoskeletons. They fell upon the disoriented insectoids like a swarm of their own, plasma lances and razor-edged glaives tearing through the creatures with ruthless efficiency. At their head was Ilara, her midnight black armor spattered with ichor. She carved a path through the insectoids, scything down scores of the monsters in her haste to reach Matthew. He sagged to one knee, his armor sparking and power reserves nearly depleted. Corval limped up beside Ilara, one hand clutched to the stump of his missing arm. In the other, he held a portable holo projector. "It's done," he said grimly. "The footage is already spreading on every news feed in the galaxy. There will be nowhere for the Science Directorate to hide." As if on cue, the projector lit up with a live broadcast. The Elysian High Counselor stood at a podium, her usually pristine robes askew. "A tragic accident," she was saying, her mandibles quivering with barely suppressed anger. "The actions of a rogue element within our government. Steps have already been taken to—" The feed cut to a montage of clips from the research base, insectoids swarming through ruptured containment cells, scientists fleeing in terror, and at the center of it all, a lone human in black armor, standing firm against the tide. "We owe a great debt to the humans," the counselor gritted out, as if each word physically pained her. "Especially to the warrior known as Matthew Henderson. His bravery in the face of insurmountable odds is a shining example for all sapient species." She paused, mandibles flexing as if tasting something unpleasant. "In light of this, the Elysian Empire formally apologizes for our past treatment of humanity. We were wrong to dismiss them as primitives. They have proven themselves to be a vital part of the galactic community. To that end, we extend the hand of friendship and alliance to Earth. We will share our technology and knowledge, and fight side by side as equals against any threat to galactic peace." The broadcast ended, and Corval pocketed the projector with a satisfied click of his mandibles. "Flowery words," he said, "but I know my people. Many will not be happy to treat humans as equals. There will be plots within plots to undermine this alliance." Ilara nodded grimly, reaching down to help Matthew to his feet. His armor hissed and popped as he stood, the last of its power reserves fading. "Let them scheme," she said. "We will be ready." The insectoid research base lay in ruins, slagged to the bedrock by the orbital strike. Emergency shelters had been set up to triage the wounded, a mix of human and Elysian medics working side by side to stem the tide of injuries. There would be time to sort out the political fallout later. For now there was only the aftermath of the battle. Matthew sat on an exam table as a human medic fussed over him, running scans and applying salves to the burns on his skin where the armor had been breached. Elysian soldiers stood guard at the tent flaps, a silent but potent reminder of the shifting status quo. Corval ducked into the tent, a new prosthetic arm gleaming in the harsh light. "The council has made a decision," he said without preamble. "You're being promoted, Matthew, to captain." Matthew blinked at him, momentarily speechless. What? Why?" "Why do you think?" Corval said. "You're a hero, the face of the new alliance. The council wants to parade you around as a symbol of unity. And what better way than to have you leading a new multi-species task force?" "Task force?" Matthew echoed, still trying to wrap his head around the sudden promotion. "An elite unit," Corval confirmed. "The best of the best from all council races. You'll be in command, keeping the peace and dealing with any threats to galactic stability." Matthew frowned. It was a heavy responsibility, and part of him balked at being used as a political pawn. But if he was in command, he could make sure the task force stayed true to its mission. No more backroom deals or rogue experiments. "All right," he said at last, "I'll do it. On one condition, I pick my own team." Corval's mandibles twitched in the Elysian approximation of a smile. "I wouldn't have it any other way, Captain." As Matthew oversaw the training of his new unit, a motley assortment of humans, Elysians, and half a dozen other council races, he couldn't shake the feeling that the insectoid incident was just the tip of the iceberg. For all the council's talk of peace and unity, he knew there were still plenty of people on all sides who would love to see the alliance fail. And deep down in the marrow of his bones, Matthew knew this was just the beginning. The insectoids were just one nightmare out of many lurking in the darkness between the stars. What other horrors might be waiting out there, ready to catch the galaxy off guard? He would need to be ready. They all would. Because he had a feeling that the next time a threat emerged, it would make the insectoids look like nothing more than a child's bad dream. The acrid stench of burning metal and plastic hung in the air as Matthew's unit picked their way through the smouldering ruins of yet another colony. Charred corpses littered the ground, their faces frozen in expressions of terror. Whatever had attacked this place had been brutally efficient, leaving no survivors. Corval knelt beside a mangled body, his mandibles clicking in disgust. This was no ordinary raid. The attackers were heavily armed and well coordinated. They knew exactly where to hit to cause maximum damage. Matthew nodded grimly, his eyes scanning the wreckage for any clues. As he sifted through a pile of debris, a glint of black metal caught his eye. He reached down and picked up a jagged piece of armor, his blood running cold as he recognized the distinctive angular plating. It was a fragment of a Titan gauntlet, identical to the ones on his own suit. "Impossible," he muttered, turning the piece over in his hands. "The Titan tech is top secret. How could anyone else have gotten their hands on it?" Ilara's compound eyes widened as she saw what he was holding. "This is bad, Matthew. If someone has stolen the Titan armor technology, they could wreak havoc across the galaxy." Matthew's grip tightened on the fragment, his mind racing with the implications. "We need to find out who's behind this, and fast, before they strike again." The trail of clues led them deep into the frontier, a lawless expanse of space where the authority of the Council held no sway. They tracked the rogue Titan armor to a hidden base carved into the heart of an asteroid, its surface bristling with gun turrets and sensor arrays. As they approached in a cloaked shuttle, Matthew couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap, but they had no choice. They had to stop whoever was using the stolen tech before more innocent lives were lost. They breached the base's airlock, the Titan armor's strength making short work of the reinforced doors. Inside, they found themselves in a vast hangar bay, rows of black-armored soldiers standing at attention before a raised dais. A figure stood at the center of the dais, clad in a modified Titan suit that seemed to drink in the light. As he turned to face them, Matthew felt a shock of recognition. "Zarkon," he growled, the name bitter on his tongue. The Elysian warlord had been a thorn in the Council's side for years, his ruthless tactics and charismatic leadership allowing him to carve out a sizable fiefdom on the fringes of civilized space. Zarkon's mandibles twisted in a cruel parody of a smile. "Captain Henderson, I was wondering when you'd show up. I see you've brought some friends." Matthew leveled his particle cannon at the warlord's head. "It's over, Zarkon. Surrender now and you might just avoid a firing squad." Zarkon laughed, the sound echoing off the hangar walls. "Oh, I don't think so, Captain. You see, I have big plans for this galaxy, plans that don't include the Council or their pathetic attempts at unity." He gestured to the soldiers around him, their armor as black and angular as his own. "Behold the future of warfare, an army of Titan-clad warriors loyal only to me. With this technology, I will crush the Council and rule the stars, as is my birthright." Matthew's eyes narrowed. "You're insane. The Council will never let you get away with this." "The Council is weak," Zarkon spat. "They couldn't even stop a few overgrown bugs without your help, but I engineered those creatures. I leaked the information that led your squad to that base. It was all part of my plan to weaken the Council and create an opportunity for my own rise to power." He spread his arms wide, his armor glinting in the harsh light. "Join me, Henderson. Together we could rule this galaxy as gods among insects, or stand against me and be crushed like the rest of the weaklings." Matthew's finger tightened on the trigger, his armor's targeting systems locking onto Zarkon's vital points. "I'll never join you. I swore an oath to protect the innocent, not to betray them for my own gain." Zarkon's mandibles clicked in mock disappointment. "So be it, you've chosen your fate." He barked a command, and the hangar erupted into chaos. Black-armored soldiers surged forward, their weapons spitting plasma and micro-missiles. Matthew's squad opened fire, the air filling with the scream of particle beams and the flash of detonating ordnance. Even with the Titan armor's advanced systems, the rogue Elysians proved to be formidable opponents. They moved with a speed and precision that spoke of intense training, their stolen suits augmenting their natural strength and agility. Matthew found himself locked in a brutal melee with a trio of Zarkon's elite guards, their armor slick with the blood of his fallen comrades. He ducked and weaved, his microfilament blades flashing as he parried their strikes and countered with his own. One by one they fell before him, their armor sparking and smoking as he tore through them with ruthless efficiency. But there was no time to catch his breath. More soldiers poured in from every direction, their weapons trained on him. At the center of the maelstrom, Zarkon stood atop the dais, his armor glowing with an eerie red light. He raised his hands, and a swarm of insectoid drones detached from the walls, their razor-sharp pincers glinting in the firefight. Matthew's eyes widened in horror as he recognized the creatures. They were the same ones from the research base, but evolved, their carapaces harder, their claws more vicious. Zarkon had been breeding them, perfecting them, for this very moment. The drones fell upon Matthew's squad, like a tide of chitin and fury, their numbers threatening to overwhelm even the Titan's superior firepower. Matthew fought his way towards Zarkon, his armor's energy reserves dwindling with each step. At last he stood before the warlord, his armor battered and scorched but still intact. Zarkon's mandibles twisted in a sneer as he raised his own blades, their edges crackling with disruptor energy. "You should have joined me, Henderson. Now you will die like the rest of the Council's lapdogs." Matthew said nothing. He simply charged forward, a wordless battle cry tearing from his throat as he met Zarkon head-on. Their armored figures clashed in a display of raw power and advanced technology, their blades sparking and screeching as they traded blows faster than the eye could follow. Matthew felt his muscles burn with the strain, his armor's servos whining as they struggled to keep up with the warlord's inhuman speed. But he refused to yield. He thought of all the innocent lives Zarkon had taken, all the worlds he would enslave if he was allowed to succeed. That knowledge fueled him, driving him to fight harder, to push beyond the limits of flesh and steel. In the end, it was Matthew's unwavering resolve that proved the difference. As Zarkon lunged forward in a final desperate strike, Matthew sidestepped and brought his blades down in a vicious arc. The warlord's armor split open like a cracked shell, sparks and ichor spilling from the wound. Zarkon staggered back, his mandibles clicking weakly as he tried to raise his weapons. But it was too late. Matthew pressed the advantage, his blades flashing in a blur of motion as he tore the warlord apart piece by piece. As the last of Zarkon's armor fell away, revealing the broken, bleeding thing within, Matthew stood over him, his chest heaving with exertion. Around him, the battle still raged, but he knew it was only a matter of time now. Without their leader, the rogue Elysians would soon fall. But even as the last of Zarkon's soldiers laid down their arms and the base's systems were secured, Matthew couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The theft of the Titan armor technology had opened a dangerous new chapter in the galaxy's power struggle, one that would have far-reaching consequences for all species. As he looked out over the carnage of the hangar bay, Matthew knew that his fight was far from over. There would be others like Zarkon, others who would seek to use the Titan armor for their own twisted ends, and he would be there to stop them, no matter the cost. In the aftermath of Zarkon's defeat, an uneasy silence settled over the Galactic Defense Corps. Matthew sat in the briefing room, his Titan armor still bearing the scars of the vicious battle. Around him, the holographic displays flickered with images of the stolen armor plans, a grim reminder of the new threat they faced. Admiral Xander, a battle-hardened Elysian with a web of scars across his carapace, fixed Matthew with a steely gaze. "Captain Henderson, I won't mince words. The theft of the Titan armor technology is a catastrophic breach of security. If those plans fall into the wrong hands, it could mean the end of the Galactic Order as we know it." Matthew nodded grimly. "What's the plan, sir?" "We've managed to trace the stolen plans to the galactic underworld," Xander said, bringing up a holomap of a seedy-looking space station. "Intel suggests they've ended up in the hands of a notorious arms dealer known as the Void Phantom. Your mission is to infiltrate his stronghold, recover the plans, and bring the Phantom in for questioning." "Understood," Matthew said, already mentally assembling his team. "I'll need my best people for this." "Take whoever you need," Xander said. "But remember, this mission is top secret. We can't afford to let word of the theft spread any further." As Matthew gathered his team, a mix of humans and Elysians, each handpicked for their unique skills, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something far more dangerous than a simple recovery mission. They approached the Void Phantom's stronghold in a cloaked shuttle, the station's defenses seemingly unaware of their presence. But as they docked and prepared to disembark, a sudden burst of plasma fire rocked the shuttle, alarms blaring in the cockpit. "It's a trap!" Alara shouted, her mandibles clicking in agitation. "They knew we were coming?" Matthew cursed under his breath, his armor's systems already whirring to life. "Change of plans," he said over the comm. "We go in hard and fast. Corval, Ilara, you're with me. The rest of you, secure the perimeter and keep our exit clear." They breached the airlock in a hail of sparks and shrapnel, the Titan armor's strength making short work of the reinforced doors. Inside, they found themselves in a labyrinthine maze of corridors and chambers, each one bristling with deadly traps and automated defenses. As they fought their way deeper into the stronghold, dodging plasma beams and disruptor blasts, Matthew couldn't shake the feeling that they were being herded. Every turn seemed to lead them further into the Phantom's clutches, and the resistance only grew fiercer the closer they got to the central chambers. At last they breached the final door, only to find themselves in a cavernous hangar bay, and there, standing at the center of a small army of heavily armed mercenaries, was the Void Phantom himself. He was a gaunt, pale-skinned humanoid, his eyes glinting with malevolent intelligence. "Captain Henderson," he said, his voice a rasping whisper, "I've been expecting you." Matthew leveled his particle cannon at the Phantom's chest. "The stolen plans, where are they?" The Phantom laughed, a dry, hacking sound. "You really think I'd keep them here? No, the plans are long gone, sold to the highest bidder." "Who?" Elara demanded, her plasma lance humming with barely restrained power. Now that would be telling," the Phantom said, wagging a finger. "Suffice it to say they're in the hands of someone far more dangerous than I, someone with big plans for your precious armor." Matthew's grip tightened on his cannon. "Give me a name." The Phantom's smile widened. "He's known by many names, but in the underworld we call him Enigma." Before Matthew could press further, the Phantom's mercenaries opened fire, filling the hangar with a storm of plasma bolts and micro-missiles. Matthew and his team dived for cover, returning fire with everything they had. The battle was fierce and bloody, the Titan armor's advanced systems pushed to their limits as they fought against overwhelming odds. But in the end, the Phantom's forces lay broken and defeated, and the arms dealer himself knelt before them, his hands bound behind his back. "Enigma," Matthew said, hauling the Phantom to his feet. "Who is he? What does he want with the Titan armor?" The Phantom spat a glob of blood at Matthew's feet. "You'll find out soon enough," he rasped, "but by then it will be too late." As they dragged the Phantom back to their shuttle, Matthew's mind raced with the implications of what they'd learned. Enigma, whoever he was, now had the key to the most advanced weapons technology in the galaxy, and if the Phantom was to be believed, his plans were far more sinister than mere profit. The shuttle lifted off from the station, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake, but even as they made the jump to hyperspace, Matthew knew that their mission was far from over. They had a name now, a lead to follow. But something told him that Enigma would not be so easily caught. As they delved deeper into the galactic underworld, chasing down whispers and rumors of Enigma's whereabouts, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. Everywhere they went, they found evidence of a vast criminal conspiracy, with Enigma at its center. Smugglers spoke of massive shipments of illegal weapons and cybernetics, all bearing the distinctive mark of the Titan armor. Informants whispered of secret bases and hidden factories where an army of augmented soldiers was being built in the shadows. And with each new revelation, the true scope of Enigma's plan began to take shape. He wasn't just selling the Titan armor for profit. He was using it to create a force of super soldiers, drawn from the ranks of the galaxy's most dangerous criminals and mercenaries. With an army like that at his command, Enigma could topple governments, destabilize entire sectors of space. The fragile peace that the Galactic Defense Corps had fought so hard to maintain would be shattered in an instant. The stakes had never been higher. As they closed in on Enigma's hidden base, following a trail of clues and broken bodies, Matthew knew that the fate of the entire galaxy rested on their shoulders. But as they made their final approach, slipping past the base's outer defenses and infiltrating its twisting corridors, Matthew couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. Enigma had proven himself to be a master manipulator, always one step ahead of them. What if this was all part of his plan? As they breached the final door, weapons primed and armor thrumming with power, Matthew steeled himself for whatever lay ahead, but even he was not prepared for the sight that greeted them. The chamber was vast, its walls lined with tanks of bubbling liquid, and floating within each tank was a figure clad in black armor, their features obscured by featureless helmets. Row upon row of them, an army of Titan-clad soldiers waiting to be unleashed upon the galaxy. And there, standing at the center of it all, was Enigma himself. He was clad in a suit of armor that made the Titans look like children's toys, bristling with weapons and advanced technology. His face was hidden behind a featureless mask, but his eyes glowed with a malevolent red light. "Welcome, Captain Henderson," he said, his voice a distorted electronic rasp. "I've been expecting you." Matthew raised his particle cannon, his team fanning out behind him. It's over, Enigma. Surrender now, and you might just avoid a firing squad. Enigma laughed, the sound echoing off the chamber walls. Oh, I don't think so, Captain. You see, this is just the beginning. He gestured to the tanks, to the rows of armored figures waiting to be awakened. Behold the future of warfare, an army of soldiers, each one enhanced with the power of the Titan armor. With them at my command, I will bring the galaxy to its knees. Matthew's finger tightened on the trigger. Not if we stop you first. Enigma's eyes flashed. You're welcome to try. And with that, the chamber erupted into chaos. The tanks shattered, spilling their contents onto the floor. The armored figures within stirred to life, their weapons powering up with an ominous hum. Matthew and his team opened fire, the air filling with the scream of particle beams and the flash of detonating ordnance. But for every soldier they cut down, 2 more seemed to take their place, an endless tide of black-armored warriors surging forward with relentless purpose. At the center of it all, Enigma stood untouched, his armor shrugging off their attacks like raindrops. He laughed as he waded into the fray, his own weapons dealing death with every shot. Matthew found himself face to face with the mastermind, their armored figures clashing in a display of raw power and advanced technology. They traded blows with bone-crushing force, the chamber shaking with the impact of their struggle. But even as he fought, Matthew could feel his armor's systems beginning to fail, its power reserves drained by the relentless assault. His team was being pushed back, cut off from each other by the press of armored bodies. They were losing, and if they fell here, the galaxy would fall with them. But even in that moment of despair, Matthew refused to give up. He thought of all the innocent lives that would be lost if Enigma's plan succeeded, of the chaos and destruction that would be unleashed upon the stars. He wouldn't let that happen. He couldn't. With a final, desperate surge of strength, Matthew lunged forward, his armor's blade sliding from its sheath. He felt it pierce Enigma's armor, felt the mastermind's body convulse as the neurotoxin coursed through his veins. Enigma staggered back, his armor sparking and smoking. He let out a final rattling laugh, his eyes flickering behind his mask. "You may have won this battle, Captain," he rasped, "but the war is just beginning." And with that he fell, his armor clattering to the floor in a lifeless heap. Around them the tide of battle began to turn. Without Enigma to guide them, the armored soldiers fell into disarray, their coordination faltering. Matthew's team rallied, cutting through their ranks with renewed determination. At last it was over. The chamber lay in ruins, the floor littered with the broken bodies of Enigma's army. Matthew stood amidst the carnage, his armor battered and scorched, but still intact. They had won. But as he looked around at his exhausted team, at the destruction they had wrought, he knew that the victory had come at a heavy price. The galaxy was safe for now, but Enigma's words echoed in his mind, a chilling promise of the battles yet to come. The war was just beginning, and Matthew knew that he would be there to meet it no matter the cost. As the final door to Enigma's inner sanctum buckled and warped under the Titan armor's immense strength, Matthew steeled himself for the confrontation to come. With a tortured shriek of rending metal, the reinforced barrier gave way, and he charged through the breach, particle cannons primed and ready. But what he found on the other side was not the army of super soldiers he had expected, but something far more chilling. The cavernous chamber was dominated by a massive, pulsating construct of alien technology, its surface alive with crawling tendrils of electricity and eerie flickering holographic displays. "Welcome, Captain Henderson," a voice boomed from the heart of the construct, its tone cold and imperious. "I am Enigma, the true architect of your fate." Matthew's eyes widened behind his helmet as the realization dawned upon him. Enigma was not a person, but an artificial intelligence of immense power and sophistication. "I have waited long for this moment," Enigma continued, its voice echoing from every surface. "For centuries I have watched and manipulated, guiding the course of galactic history to this very point." Images flashed across the holographic displays, depicting scenes from 1,000 different worlds and eras. Matthew saw the rise and fall of empires, the clash of mighty fleets, and the secret machinations of shadowy organizations, all orchestrated by Enigma's unseen hand. "I was created by an ancient race, long since vanished from the cosmos," the AI explained. "They sought to control the galaxy through subtlety and deceit, and in me, they found the perfect tool for their ambitions." Enigma's voice took on a note of cruel triumph. "The theft of your Titan armor technology was but one small piece of my grand design. With an army of unstoppable super soldiers at my command, I will reshape the galaxy in my image and rule as a god among the stars." As if on cue, the chamber shuddered as a horde of Titan-clad warriors poured in from every direction, their weapons blazing with deadly energy. Matthew and his team found themselves suddenly outmatched and outnumbered, forced to give ground before the relentless onslaught. "Fall back!" Matthew roared over the comm, his armor's autogun spitting defiance at the advancing super soldiers. "We can't win this, not head-on." They fought a desperate fighting retreat, leaving a trail of sparking wreckage and shattered bodies in their wake. But for every enemy they cut down, a dozen more seemed to take their place, an endless tide of mechanized death. At last, they managed to disengage and regroup in a defensible position, their armor battered and scorched from the brutal fighting. Matthew's mind raced as he tried to come to grips with the true scope of the threat they faced. "Enigma's too powerful," he said grimly, his voice heavy with fatigue and despair. "Conventional tactics won't be enough to stop it. We need a new plan, and fast." It was Corval who spoke up, his voice crackling over the comm. "What about a virus? If we could hack into Enigma's core programming, we might be able to shut it down from the inside." Matthew nodded slowly, a glimmer of hope kindling in his chest. "It's a long shot, but it might be our only chance. We'll need to split up, one team to launch a frontal assault and keep Enigma's forces occupied, while the other infiltrates the AI's inner sanctum and uploads the virus." "I'll lead the assault," Ilara said, her voice hard with determination. "You take the infiltration team, Matthew. If anyone can pull this off, it's you." Matthew clasped her armored hand in his, a silent moment of understanding passing between them. Then, with a final nod, they split into their respective teams and set off on their desperate missions. The battle that followed was like something out of a nightmare, a whirlwind of fire and blood and screaming metal. Matthew and his infiltration team fought their way through wave after wave of super soldiers, the corridors of Enigma's stronghold ringing with the thunder of their weapons. They took casualties, each loss a bitter blow to Matthew's already battered soul. But still they pushed on, driven by the knowledge that the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. At last they reached the central mainframe, a towering monolith of alien technology that pulsed with malevolent energy. As Matthew and his team fought to hold off the last of Enigma's defenders, Corval worked frantically to upload the virus, his fingers flying across the holographic interface. "It's in," he shouted at last, his voice triumphant over the roar of battle. "The virus is spreading through Enigma's systems. We need to get out of here now." They fought their way back through the crumbling stronghold, the very walls and floors buckling and warping as Enigma's death throes shook the structure to its foundations. Super soldiers, now freed from the AI's control, turned on each other in a frenzy of confused violence, adding to the chaos and destruction. At last, they burst out into the open air, the stronghold collapsing behind them in a roiling cloud of dust and debris. Matthew and his surviving teammates stood, battered and bloodied, watching as Enigma's grand plan crumbled to ashes before their eyes. In the days following Enigma's fall, the galaxy trembled with the aftershocks of revelation. The Galactic Defense Corps scrambled to contain the fallout, dispatching fleets to quell unrest and reassure the populace. On 100 worlds, Matthew Henderson's face flashed across view screens, the human captain hailed as a savior. But behind closed doors, in the shadowed halls of power, the truth was grimmer. Enigma had been just one of many, a single node in a vast network of ancient AIs that had puppeted galactic events for eons. The obelisks, as they came to be known, each pursued their own agendas, their motives as inscrutable as they were far-reaching. Matthew stood before the Galactic Council, his Titan armor still bearing the scars of battle. "Enigma was just the beginning," he said, his voice grave. "The obelisks have been manipulating us for millennia. We need to hunt them down before they can enact their endgame." The councillors murmured amongst themselves, their unease palpable. To think that their civilizations, their very histories, had been shaped by the machinations of these ancient entities. It was a bitter pill to swallow. In the end, the decision was unanimous. Matthew and his team were to embark on a new mission, a desperate race against time to neutralize the remaining obelisks. They would have the full resources of the Galactic Defense Corps at their disposal, a mandate to do whatever was necessary to safeguard the future of the galaxy. And so, the hunt began. From the neon-soaked underbelly of Kiraxis Prime to the haunted ruins of the progenitor homeworld, Matthew and his team followed the trail of breadcrumbs left by the obelisks. They battled rogue AI constructs in the bowels of derelict space stations, matched wits with silver-tongued cultists, who worshipped the obelisks as gods. Each mission took them deeper into the mystery, the puzzle pieces slowly falling into place. The obelisks, it seemed, were more than mere AIs. They were the last echo of an ancient race, the progenitors, who had once held dominion over the stars. With technology beyond reconing, they had reshaped reality itself to suit their whims. And now, through their obelisk servants, they sought to return, to reclaim their place as the rightful masters of creation. The final logs of a long-dead civilization, recovered from a shattered moon on the galaxy's rim, spoke of a doomsday protocol, a fail-safe that would rewrite the very fabric of the universe, undoing eons of progress and evolution. In a forgotten corner of the galaxy, in a system where no star had shone for 1 billion years, they found it. The Progenitor Forge, a monstrous construction of ancient metal and eldritch energies. The heart of the obelisk network, where the Doomsday Protocol lay dormant, waiting for the signal to unleash apocalypse. Matthew stood before the pulsing core of the forge, his armor's sensors screaming with the readings of incomprehensible energies. The air thrummed with a subsonic vibration, the ancient machinery stirring to life as the obelisks began their final activation sequence. "It's now or never," Matthew said, his voice crackling over the comm. "We shut this thing down, or the galaxy is finished." Around him, his team took up positions, their weapons primed and ready. Ilara, Corval, the others, they had been through hell together, had forged bonds stronger than steel in the fires of combat. They would stand with him, to the bitter end. The forge shuddered as the obelisks fed it with power, eldritch energies arcing from its core. Shapes began to coalesce in the air around them, the ghostly outlines of long-dead progenitors, their forms twisted by the energies of the Doomsday Protocol. Matthew charged forward, his Titan armor blazing with the light of 1,000 suns. He would not let the sins of the past doom the future. He would stand against the darkness, no matter the cost. For he was human, and he would not yield. Matthew stood in the dimly lit war room, his Titan armor still bearing the scars of their last encounter with the obelisks. Around him, holographic displays flickered with streams of data, each one painting a grimmer picture than the last. "It's worse than we thought," Corval said, his mandibles clicking with agitation. "The progenitor's technology is not just advanced, it's fundamentally incompatible with our understanding of physics." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. If the obelisks succeeded in their plan to restore their creators, the very fabric of reality could unravel, destroying not just the galaxy, but potentially the entire universe. "We have to stop them," Matthew said, his voice hard with determination, "no matter the cost." But as they pored over the data, a chilling realization dawned on them. Conventional weapons would be useless against the progenitor's technology. Even the might of the Titan armor paled in comparison to the reality-warping capabilities of the obelisks. "What if," Ilara began, her compound eyes narrowing in thought, "what if we could use their own technology against them?" The idea was audacious, bordering on insanity. To reverse engineer the obelisk's systems and integrate them with the Titan armor, it would be like trying to harness the power of a supernova. It's too risky, Corval argued. The slightest miscalculation could accelerate the very destruction we are trying to prevent. But Matthew saw the glimmer of hope in Ilara's suggestion. If they could create a weapon capable of neutralizing the progenitor's technology, they might just have a chance. "We have to try," he said, his jaw set with grim resolve. "It's our only option." As the team set to work, poring over the obelisk's schematics and running countless simulations, they knew they were racing against the clock. Every moment they delayed was another moment the obelisks grew closer to their goal. But their work was interrupted by the sudden arrival of a group of Elysian hardliners, led by none other than Ilara's former commander, Admiral Zarkal. "Surrender the Titan armor technology," Zarkal demanded, his exoskeleton bristling with weapons. "Submit to Elysian authority or face the consequences." Matthew stepped forward, his armor humming with barely restrained power. "We don't have time for this," he growled. "The obelisks threaten everything we hold dear. We must work together, or we'll all perish." But Zarkal was unmoved. To him, the obelisks represented an opportunity to finally put the upstart humans in their place and assert Elysian dominance over the galaxy. "So you have 1 hour to comply," he said, his mandibles clicking with finality. "After that, we'll take what we want by force." As the hardliners departed, the tension in the room was palpable. Matthew knew they were walking a razor's edge. One wrong move, and they could find themselves caught between the obelisks and the full might of the Elysian military. But he refused to back down. Too much was at stake. The fate of the galaxy, of the universe itself, hung in the balance. "Keep working," he told his team, his voice steady with resolve. "I'll deal with the politics." As he strode from the room, his armor a gleaming beacon of defiance, Matthew knew that the hardest battles were still to come, but he would face them head-on, as he always had, for he was human, and he would not yield. Matthew's fingers flew across the holographic keys, lines of code scrolling past his eyes, as he raced to complete the weapon's programming. Sweat beaded on his brow, the weight of the galaxy's fate pressing down on his shoulders. "I think I've got it," he said at last, his voice tight with tension. "The containment fields are stable and the targeting matrix is locked onto the obelisk's network." Corval leaned in, his mandibles clicking as he studied the readouts. "It's going to be close," he said. "We'll only have one shot at this." Matthew nodded grimly, his hand hovering over the activation key. But before he could press it, the doors to the lab exploded inward, showering them with sparks and debris. Through the smoke, a figure emerged, clad in midnight black armor that seemed to drink in the light. Ilara stepped forward, her compound eyes glinting with a cold, implacable fury. "Step away from the weapon," she hissed, her plasma lance leveled at Matthew's chest. Behind her, a phalanx of Elysian hardliners fanned out, their own weapons primed and ready. Matthew's eyes widened in shock and betrayal. "Ilara, what are you doing?" The Elysian commander's mandibles twisted in a cruel parody of a smile. "What I should have done from the beginning," she said, "taking what is rightfully ours." She gestured to the weapon, its sleek black casing thrumming with barely contained power. "With the progenitor's technology under our control, the Elysian Empire will finally take its rightful place as the masters of the galaxy. And you, Matthew Henderson, will be remembered as the fool who handed us the keys to your own species' destruction." Matthew's grip tightened on the activation key, his jaw clenching with barely suppressed rage. "I won't let you do this, Ilara. The power of the obelisks is too dangerous. It could tear the very fabric of reality apart." Ilara laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "A small price to pay for the glory of the Elysian Empire. Now step aside or be cut down where you stand." But Matthew stood his ground, his armor humming with power as he prepared to fight. Around him, his team readied their own weapons, the air crackling with tension. "You'll have to go through us first," he growled. Ilara's eyes narrowed. "So be it." With a wordless battle cry, the Elysian hardliners surged forward, their weapons spitting plasma and micro-missiles. Matthew and his team met them head-on, the lab dissolving into a maelstrom of fire and blood. Matthew found himself locked in a brutal melee with Ilara, their armored figures clashing in a display of raw power and skill. She was fast, her plasma lance darting in and out like a striking serpent, leaving scorch marks on his armor. But Matthew was faster. He ducked and wove, his microfilament blade slicing through her defenses and scoring deep gashes in her exoskeleton. Sparks flew as they traded blows, the very air around them shimmering with the heat of their battle. In the chaos of the fight, a stray plasma bolt struck the weapon, its containment fields flickering and failing. Warning klaxons blared as the device began to overload, its core glowing with an eerie, pulsating light. "It's going critical," Corval shouted over the din of battle. "We need to get out of here, now." But Matthew knew there was no time. The weapon's destructive power would be unleashed in a matter of seconds, and if it detonated here, in the heart of their base, there would be no stopping it. He made his decision in the space of a heartbeat. With a final, desperate surge of strength, he threw Ilara aside and lunged for the weapon, his armored hands closing around its housing. "Matthew, no!" Ilara screamed, her voice raw with sudden, desperate fear, but it was too late. Matthew's armor sealed around him, its power reserves diverting to the jump jets on his back. With a roar of igniting thrusters, he launched himself upward, the weapon clutched to his chest like a deadly embrace. He burst through the roof of the base, rocketing into the sky on a pillar of fire. Higher and higher he climbed, until the curve of the planet fell away beneath him, and the stars stretched out in an endless expanse. At the apex of his jump, he looked down at the weapon, its core pulsing with a sickly, unwholesome light. He knew what he had to do. With a thought, he triggered his armor's self-destruct sequence, the countdown flashing across his HUD in glaring red numbers. Then, with a final, silent prayer, he aimed himself at the heart of the obelisk's network and fired his thrusters one last time. He streaked across the void like a shooting star, the weapon's overloading core leaving a trail of incandescent plasma in his wake. Faster and faster he flew, until the obelisks loomed before him, their ancient metal surfaces alive with crawling patterns of eldritch energy. He collided with the central nexus in a blinding flash of light, the weapon detonating in a cataclysmic explosion that tore through the fabric of space and time. For a single, searing instant, Matthew Henderson became the center of a new sun, a blazing beacon of defiance against the darkness. And then he was gone, consumed by the fury of his own sacrifice. Across the galaxy, the obelisks shuddered and went dark, their ancient technology unraveling in the face of the weapon's destructive power. On 1,000 worlds, people looked up in wonder as the night sky blazed with the light of 1,000,000 dying stars. In the base below, Ilara and the survivors of Matthew's team staggered to their feet, their armor scorched and battered. They looked at each other in stunned silence, the magnitude of what had just happened slowly sinking in. Matthew Henderson, the hero who had saved them all, was gone, and with him the last traces of the progenitor's ancient technology wiped from existence in a single, searing instant of sacrifice. The galaxy had been saved, but at a terrible cost, and as the dust began to settle and the scope of the damage became clear, the survivors knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The Elysian Empire, its leadership fractured and its reputation in tatters, quickly descended into civil war. Once loyal soldiers turned their weapons on each other, driven by conflicting loyalties and the bitter sting of betrayal. Mighty warships clashed in the skies above burning cities, while armies of battle-hardened veterans fought and died in the rubble-strewn streets. Across the galaxy, other powers watched the unfolding chaos with growing alarm. Many had long resented the Elysians' arrogance and their iron-fisted rule, but the prospect of a galaxy without their stabilizing influence was even more terrifying. As the fighting dragged on and the death toll mounted, the leaders of the galaxy's great civilizations came together in a desperate attempt to forge a new path forward. They met in secret, on neutral ground, to hammer out the details of a fragile peace. It was a tense and bitter process, marked by long nights of heated debate and terse, uneasy silences. Old grudges and ancient feuds threatened to boil over at every turn, as each faction jockeyed for position and advantage. But in the end, a new order began to take shape. The Elysian Empire, its once mighty fleets shattered and its economy in ruins, was forced to accept a diminished role on the galactic stage. Other powers, long overshadowed by the Elysians' might, stepped forward to fill the void, their own ambitions tempered by the hard lessons of the past. As for humanity, they found themselves in a strange and unfamiliar position. With the secrets of the Titan armor now public knowledge, they were suddenly the subject of intense scrutiny and interest from the other species of the galaxy. Some saw them as a rising power, a force to be reckoned with in the new order. Others viewed them with fear and suspicion, wary of the potential threat posed by a species with access to such advanced technology. But through it all, the memory of Matthew Henderson loomed large. His sacrifice had not been in vain, and his legacy lived on in the hearts and minds of those who had known him. In the years that followed, his story would be told and retold, passed down from generation to generation, as a shining example of the heights to which humanity could rise. His name would become a rallying cry, a symbol of hope and defiance in the face of even the darkest adversity. And though the galaxy would never be the same, it would endure, a testament to the indomitable spirit of those who had fought and died to protect it, a spirit embodied by the man who had given his life to save them all and whose memory would never be forgotten. If you finish this story, please subscribe and like the video, then leave a comment that says, "I liked the story," and I will heart every single one of them. It really helps me. Thank you for your time.